Marhaba, welcome to the show. This is the first episode of Mushkelji's book reviews. Please bear with me as I learn what works and what doesn't, but for now, enjoy the intro music and prepare to listen to Anabasis. I'm going to start by saying every young man must read this book. There's truly no better example of somebody thrust into uncertain circumstances who has to become leader. Xenophon, time and again, is set with unique challenges and executes relatively flawlessly. He does have early setbacks, but these are also turned into lessons. First, I will provide some background on Xenophon himself before we dig into the text. So for context, Xenophon comes up right after the Peloponnesian War reaches its conclusion. He's an Athenian and was a student of Socrates. He's a contemporary of Plato, and he'd go on to write some of his own dialogues and has a famous biography of Agesilaus, the Spartan king. In 401 BC, he's invited to accompany his friend Proxenus on an expedition to the Persian Empire. They're going to be serving as mercenaries in a band of 10,000 Greeks to assist the brother to the Persian emperor, Cyrus, in his claim to the throne. The best way to think about these Greek hoplites and the peltist of the time would be how we'd view Blackwater or the Wagner Group. It's really an elite group of people that you're hiring with a lot of money for the intent of doing something pretty grand. Xenophon goes as an observer initially, but calamity strikes the Greeks and Cyrus, and he gets thrust into a leadership role, which is going to lead to one of the greatest tales of the ancient world. For this episode, I used Henry Graham Dakin's 1892 translation, if I pronounced that right. It's pretty rich in prose, it's relatively easy to follow along with, and it provides good notes in the margins to provide more context. The Anabasis begins by covering Cyrus's doomed army initially. It won't be until the end of the first book that we really get a profile of Xenophon himself. Xenophon's going to describe Cyrus in pretty good detail. He's going to make sure to let us know that he's heroic, he's competent, and he's cunning. And he's going to continue to do this throughout the book, even though, as we'll see, he really has no reason to continue to have patronage to him. The next person we're going to have profiled is Clearchus. He's a Spartan who is the leader of the Greeks. Now, the text throughout the first book is going to cover their battles all the way up to the Persian capital until they face off with Cyrus's brother, Artaxerxes. They're going to fight at the Battle of Canoxa. At the Battle of Canoxa, Cyrus will use the Greeks as his elite shock troops to initially make the forward movement. Cyrus himself then sees Artaxerxes and makes his own charge towards him, trying to end the battle right there. Unfortunately, his bravery gets the best of him, and he's felled by an elite Persian unit. At this point, the Greeks are put in a pretty precarious situation, so they retreat towards the river, but they know if they surrender, they're likely all going to be executed. But at the same time, if Artaxerxes masses his forces and comes at them, they're also probably going to die. So they hold council. The Persian general Tissaphernes offers to mediate and negotiate with them. Now, he has Clearchus and almost all of the leadership of the Greeks. Now, keep in mind, they're from different disparate parts of Greece, and each have their own sort of individual leaders per region, roughly. Well, they all meet inside of a tent, and Tissaphernes betrays them and murders all of these leaders. The army at this point is bereft of really any leadership. At this point, they hold a vote, and Chrysophus, another general, and Xenophon are elected to split command. For their initial movement, Xenophon takes initiative from the back and rouses these men with speeches, while Chrysophus leads the men just trying to get out to the river, get away. Now, we see Xenophon's first foray into actual tactical matters here, and he's getting harassed by Persian archers who can outrange their own, and he directs a charge by the infantry. This ultimately is not going to work for him, and he learns a lot of lessons from this and is able to make speeches showing his own humility. Now, what he does here is pretty ingenious, that he creates a cavalry unit out of thin air. So something the Greeks, apart from the Thessalians, really lacked was cavalry. And Xenophon's going to go out and buy any horses he can, find any mercenaries he can, and he creates a small cavalry unit. And he utilizes this cavalry unit to take out similar units in the future. The army of the 10,000 is going to go north at this point. Now, the phrase Anabasis in Greek actually means going up, which is functionally what the army is going to do from here. Now, Xenophon's going to enter a multitude of countries that some are friendly, some are not, and many times he has to use his tactical genius to get himself out of pretty bad situations with the army. There's going to be times where he has to rouse his men up through great speeches, but he's going to go place to place until they reach the port of Trapezus. Now, this is a Greek city, and from here, they're going to send Cherysopus back towards Greece to try and get ships to get them out. But as you can imagine, this fails, and they decide they need to march west throughout it. Eventually, Xenophon himself is betrayed by people within his ranks and kind of from outside influences. One of the things he's accused of doing is to want to create a colony, basically to carve his own kingdom out. Now, he is a great man, and he does consider this, but ultimately he never actually committed to this, and the rumors were taken as a way to basically discredit him and try to get other people in charge. As he does time and again, he utilizes his oratory skills to get out of this dilemma and give the army more morale than it even had before. Xenophon's going to become frustrated throughout this. He never really asked to be the leader, and the betrayals he faces after taking them through incredible hardship frustrate him. So he tries to quit as the leader. The army splits itself up and decides they're going to get to Greece by different means through different areas. This really fails, though. Some of them find hardship, and they reconsolidate and almost force Xenophon back into being the leader. As they're pretty close to Greece, a Spartan army, who we got to keep in mind are the predominant force pretty much in the entire Aegean Sea after the Peloponnesian War, they show up, and issues start to arise. There's an important story that we'll get into later here, but there's an incident where some of his men are accused of stealing, and through Xenophon's great diplomacy and leadership skills, he's able to get them pardoned without violence occurring. And it's important to note that if they get in the bad side of the Spartans, they're all going to become marked men, which is going to prevent them from getting home, at least for a lot of them. He navigates this challenge, but after this, they don't have any food or money. And unlike today, where it's pretty easy to get place to place, even what looks small on the map of how they have to go ends up being almost insurmountable for them. Now, they're near the Thracians at this point, who are barbarians and a wild people, but are somewhat still kind of Hellenized and close by. We'll see later with Alexander, he has maybe a little bit closer relationship with them than these Greeks do. Out of necessity, they're going to find themselves under the service of a Thracian king, Seuthes. Now, he makes them a lot of promises about pay, their own land, and everything they're going to get. Ultimately, this well-trained, experienced force defeats all of Seuthes' enemies, but when it comes time to pay up, a venomous advisor to the king, Heraclides, attempts to betray Xenophon yet again. In one of the last passages of this work, we're going to see Xenophon masterfully use his oratory skills and also use the powers of all logos, ethos, and pathos to get himself out of the dilemma. Not only does he avoid betrayal and his own death, he's able to then go and advocate and get all the pay for his men after this. The final passage of the work is going to see most of the 10,000 join the Lacedaemonians, so the Spartans, in a campaign they undertake against the Persians. There's one final scene where Xenophon leads a group to capture a Persian general, but after that, the work concludes with the implication that most joined this army or were able to return home. You could probably write a longer book itself than the Anabasis on the leadership qualities that Xenophon displays and why they're good. But for me, there's really three that I take away that are pretty applicable. The first is to be decisive. The second is to have humility, but in a way that you still carry yourself confidently. It's a little hard to explain, but I'll get into it with a passage. And then the third is to have extreme authenticity, which is going to breed trust in everyone around you. In Book 4, Chapter 6, we're going to see Xenophon display this decisiveness I'm talking about. So, for context, they come up upon the enemy occupying this mountain pass that they essentially have to get through, and there's more enemy coming, reinforcing them, and they're sort of in a dilemma where they need to make a decision now, but there's no good answer. So reading from the text, Cherysopus sees the issue and initially says, "The enemy, as you see, are in occupation of the mountain pass. It is time we should consider how we are to make the best fight to win it. My opinion is that we should give orders to the troops to take their morning meal whilst we deliberate whether we should cross the mountains today or tomorrow." Xenophon, being decisive, knows that them waiting around for an opportunity to present himself is not the best course of action. Xenophon will respond that it is much better to try, if possible, to steal a point of this desert mountain unobserved, and before they know where we are, secure the prize, and then to fly at a strong position and an enemy that's thoroughly prepared. Since it is much easier to march up a mountain without fighting than to tramp along a level when assailants are at either hand, and provided he has not to fight, a man will see what lies at his feet much more plainly, even at night, than in broad daylight in the midst of battle. Xenophon is going to continue this speech for about a page. And some of the important things to note are he has a quick and analytic breakdown of how to attack the problem, and he assigns people, specifically the Spartans and Athenians, to tasks that fit their abilities. And then we're going to see through his decisive action and his rebuttal of all of the other generals who want to wait and come up with a plan that they're able to quickly seize the initiative, force the enemy off the mountain, and the reinforcements are unable to come because then they have the strong position. The quick lesson here is that it's much better to have a hasty decision that is not perfect and seize an opportunity when your enemy is not in a good position, whether in battle and war or just generally in the working world, than to wait and come up with a plan and allow the enemy to reinforce themselves, especially when they have a lot of natural advantages against you. In Book 5, Chapter 6, Xenophon is going to display this second lesson of leadership, which is that having confidence but humility at the same time, having the yin and yang of the two. This is when Xenophon explores the idea of founding a colony, and I'll read from the text now. But Silanus, in apprehension lest these ideas might embody themselves, and the army permanently halted at some point or other, set a tale among the men, to the effect that Xenophon was minded to detain the army and found a city, in order to win himself a name and acquire power. Silanus, himself being minded to reach Hellas with all possible speed, for the simple reason that he had still got 3,000 darics presented to him by Cyrus on the occasion of the sacrifice, when he hit the truth so happily about the 10 days. The men end up buying this story, and Xenophon is forced to respond, and he gives a pretty rousing speech where he uses logic, but we're going to see this humility and the confidence from the text, since it was he, as in Silanus, who set the tale going that I had actually made up my mind to carry out these projects without procuring your consent. Now, for my part, if I saw that you were in any difficulties, I should show myself to discover how you might capture a city, on the understanding, of course, that all who wished might sail away at once, leaving those who did not wish to follow at a later date, with something perhaps in their pockets to benefit their friends at home. Now, however, as I see that the men of Heraclea and Sinope are set to send you ships to assist you sail away, and more than one person guarantees to give you regular monthly pay, it is, I admit, a rare chance to be safely piloted to the haven of our hopes, and at the same time to receive pay for our preservation. For myself, I have done with that dream, and to those who came to me to urge these projects. My advice is to have done with them. In fact, this is my view. As long as you stay together, united as today, you will command respect and procure provisions, for might certainly exercises a right over what belongs to the weaker. After this, Silanus is going to get shouted down, and all the men are going to get behind Xenophon. Now, the text I read doesn't show everything that happened, but the important things to note are that Xenophon uses logic to show that he's only going to take actions in the best interest of his men, and at the same time, he's humble enough to show that his own needs don't come first. What he really cares about is the troops and them getting home. But at the same time, when you read the passage, there's this air of confidence. He's not prostrating himself before the men or begging them for his life or coming to some sort of deal. He's confidently stating that he himself cares about them, but he's going to get them home. And this engenders confidence in them for him to still be their leader after all of this. Xenophon precedes Aristotle, but here we're going to see him strike that balance really seen in the Nicomachean Ethics. Now, this is a distinction I'm creating. Aristotle probably has better terms for it in his specific qualities, but this is really the balance between humility and confidence. In our society today, we do see a lot of people who are humble, but ultimately there are very few who are capable of being leaders. We see really an anxiety among the general populace that might allow them to explain their own faults and not take too much credit, but at the same time, it makes them incapable of being leaders. On the other side, there is a smaller group of people who have extreme confidence, but they are overconfident and narcissistic to the point where they're unable to see the needs of others, and that often manifests itself in the form of being a careerist. The lesson here from Xenophon is to still have that confidence to go and do whatever it takes, but at the same time have that inner reflection to be humble and look out for the needs of those under you. It's a difficult balance to strike, but he does it well. In Book 7, Chapter 6, near the end of the work, we're going to see Xenophon really display this extreme authenticity. Now in this, Heraclides has started his betrayal of Xenophon, and the way in which they're going to do it is they're going to offer all of his troops money and more riches, essentially more lies, just to get him out from under them so that they can trick them further. Xenophon's put on the spot and essentially has his life threatened at this point, and he's going to give his most powerful speech of the entire work. Like the earlier speech, Xenophon's going to use logic to explain why he should still lead them, but he's also going to do something a little different here. He's going to accept that he may have some fault, but he does it very tactfully. So he shows how he was loyal to Seuthes, but still says that might be a fault. From the text, if indeed since the time when Seuthes began to tell lies and cheat us about the pay, I supported him in this. You may justly find fault with me and hate me. But if I, who at first most of all his friend, today am more than anyone else at variance with him, how can I, who have chosen you and rejected Seuthes, in fairness, be blamed by you for the very thing which has been the ground of quarrel between him and me? So it's important to note, Seuthes offered Xenophon his own payout to betray his men, and he didn't, and he makes the men aware of this. But at the same time, by taking this fault, he throws it back on Seuthes. Xenophon's going to continue in a long speech to explain how he made the best decisions for them he could given the circumstances, and he sort of regales all their victories against the odds. Finally, Xenophon shows some humility at the end, but he really just accepts the situation as it is, and through this speech you can kind of see how someone could relate to him and understand he's really being authentic. From the text, and you the while, for whose sake I have incurred so much hate, the hate of people far superior to me in strength, you, for whom I have not yet ceased to devise all the good I can, entertain such sentiments about me. Why? I am no renegade or runaway slave. You have got hold of. If you carry out what you say, be sure you will have done to death a man who has passed many a vigil in watching over you, who has shared with you many a toil and run many a risk in turn and out of turn, who, thanks to the gracious gods, has by your side set up full many a trophy over the barbarian, who, lastly, has strained every nerve in his body to protect you against yourselves. And so it is that today you can move freely, where you choose, by sea or by land, and no one can say nay to you. On whom his large liberty dawns, who are sailing to a long-desired goal, who are sought after by the greatest military powers, who have pay in prospects, and for leaders these Lacedaemonians, our acknowledged chiefs. Now is the appointed time, you think, to put me to a speedy death. But in the days of our difficulties it was very different. O ye men of marvelous memory. We know Xenophon here is being authentic because he lays the situation out as it truly is. He doesn't make false promises to them about the future, a lie about the glory of the past. He explains how he got them to the point they're at, and he accepts that if they truly want to kill him, they can do this. But by again tactfully telling the story and showing how he's helped them so much, he inspires them, and they immediately rise up to defend him and turn their attention to Heraclides and Seuthes. After this, Xenophon is able to retake command and get their full pay from Seuthes after. Xenophon's going to show here that being authentic with those under you is generally almost always going to be a good thing. The only caveat is that this authenticity has to follow competence that you've displayed. A problem a lot of leaders run into is they create these speeches in their head or these justifications for how things are, and I don't know if it always comes from necessarily just a lack of empathy or overthinking the situation, but the easiest thing for a human being to see is authenticity in somebody. It's not something that's easily faked unless you're a complete sociopath, and by being authentic, you take out this guesswork of how you're being perceived and set yourself up to foster goodwill. That's all I have for today. I appreciate you sticking with me through 18 minutes of what hopefully was not me rambling. This is hopefully the first video in a long series of book reviews. Just for your awareness, this was kind of a proof of concept, so you can expect the quality is only going to go up as time goes on, especially the video editing. With that being said, have a good day. God bless. Like, share, and subscribe if you're so inclined. Min muskelji, forza Said, Master.